Okay. Hi. I had an issue with creating a live stream, so this is one of the enjoyable things about all of this online learning is every once in a while stream fails and I just have to do it again. So I apologize again that you're currently looking at my backside, but I blame the internet. So okay, I should have the correct link up on Blackboard. There we go. I just had a black marker. Still have a black marker. Welcome to what will probably be the last day we will cover actual course content for this class. What I envision the rest of this class will be is on Thursday. I was going to post the project last week. I didn't. I think that's a really good statement of how everybody's feeling right now, but I'm planning on posting that this afternoon, and I'll send out an email when I do with a document. But the final project for this class is you're going to be writing a paper. Now the paper that you're going to be writing is intended to be a lot more of a well, just kind of a review of technology. We'll have the ability to build integrated chips that can submit signals to LED screens where the chips themselves are this big. I took apart a monitor. There's a strip this long and this thin that contains all of the elements that submit signals to an entire 1,800 pixel by 1,200 pixel screen. So it's something where we have that ability to do that, but the reality of the situation is that if you wanted to really do it right, you would just call one of those existing chips. But what we're doing instead is we are showing that we have the ability to build one ourselves. Okay? I do want to discuss truth tables. Truth tables are important there. This won't have anything to do with flip-flops, but the goal of this will be to show me that you understand digital circuits and how to build them, etc., etc. Because technically you can build this entire circuit powered off of a Raspberry Pi and control it off of a Raspberry Pi, I'm actually going to have this project be oriented in that direction, where if you really wanted to build it off a Raspberry Pi, when you're done with the project, you could. I think it's fun. It's a fun little exercise. I had last year's students do it. They really enjoyed it. This project is going to replace your final. Again, I said no test, no test 2, no final exam. It's just going to be this project. So that's that. If you have any other questions, please email me. I do try to respond to emails quickly, although I've missed a few emails. My ability to answer emails is almost as good as my ability to have a good hair day. I really need to get a haircut, but I'm waiting for things to open up first. So, just like Welcome to the Afro days. Okay, so last time we talked about flip-flops. And yes, I did draw a flip-flop on the board, and then I drew a different flip-flop on the board. Okay. The idea of a flip-flop is this is a memory device. It has the ability to actually store information in it, where now information is either on or off. There are actually integrated chips that consist of multiple flip-flops where it can store 8 bits at a time and submit them serially. Those are cool. That was something that I wanted to talk about in a different chapter, but we're not going to do that. So, but there's a lot of different digital components that exist that are out there that use flip-flops fundamentally. Flip-flops can be built on a very, very small scale, and that's kind of cool. So, okay. So this time we're going to continue talking about flip-flops. One of the flip-flops that we mentioned last time was a very simple SR flip-flop. Okay, so we did talk about SR flip-flops. We also talked about clocked flip-flops. Purpose of an SR flip-flop is that I'm not going to actually draw out the circuit. You can go back to my previous lecture, take a picture at the. I'll take a look at the picture that I drew on the board if you really want to see an SR flip-flop. But what you have here is you have S, R, Q, Q prime or Q naught, and you would have a chip like this. In reality, the chip probably looks something like this, and it has a bunch of pins coming off of it. You would take this and actually physically plug it into a Raspberry Pi board. No, not a Raspberry Pi board. A breadboard. These are oftentimes made for plugging into breadboards. You have other chips that are made for going through holes that are in a printed circuit board, and then you could solder on the back side. You have other types of chips that are intended to be placed on a circuit board and then soldered from the top. The ones that are placed on the top of the circuit board tend to be the smallest. They don't have to align by the pin configurations. They oftentimes will do that. It requires some very precise machining, which I do not have the capabilities of doing, nor do I have the steadiness of hands. I doubt any of you do too, but you know what, surprised me. Well, it looks like this, and what you'll have is maybe, since this has 4 pins on it, probably would also have a pin for VN, ground. It doesn't get listed in their diagrams because they're just, it's essential for the component to work, but it's non-essential for the information transfer. So here you would have this pin on this chip would probably be S, and maybe this one would be R. Maybe this one back here would be Q, this would be Q naught or Q prime. This one would probably be V out, this one would be ground. Now, what you might also have on this chip is some way of communicating. You may also have multiple SR flip-flops on this chip. So you may have other things assigned to the pins, but you may also not. If you go and look up information on a piece, you just go in, search for the piece number online. You can oftentimes find the specifications for that exact piece, and it shows you the pin layout. And it'll label what each pin is. It'll label how much voltage the VO can handle. It'll label what the delay time is, what is the latency and response time between when a new S signal happens and when Q responds. A lot of that documentation for each of the chips has been around forever. My uncle was an electrical engineer, and he he left me a book of integrated circuits from the 90s, and most of that information is still valid. I know we like to say that, computing has come so far, but quite frankly, we're still using chips that are 30 years ago had the exact same configuration. We haven't changed them in 30 years. So that's an interesting note to make. Manufacturing processes have gotten better, and integrated chips themselves have gotten better. We've developed better sensors, smaller sensors, and more compact CPU processors. But actual chips like this, they're fairly simplistic, really extraordinarily cheap. You can build a lot of things with electronic circuits. One of the reasons why we have you take a class in electronic circuits is because if you can build something like this yourself, you can save a ton of money. You can build your own cell phone for cheaper than you can buy a cell phone. Not most of the time. You can actually, the flip phones are cheaper than, whatever. Anyways, so what we're going to talk about this time is we're just going to continue discussing flip-flops, kind of finish up our discussion on flip-flops, and then that's going to be it. I really wanted to cover flip-flops well because I think this is kind of a culmination of all of digital circuits. It takes a lot of knowledge about how digital circuits work to really be able to figure out a flip-flop, be able to do a calculation, that kind of a thing. And since we're not really doing any homework over this, I wanted to give a really good lecture over it, and that's this. Normally I would give about a 2.5 hour long lecture, and then I would have a test, a little quiz over this, so you would actually be doing it yourselves, and then be homework assignments. But that was before the Rona took away everything I loved, and all my friends and family, and hasn't touched my dog though, thankfully. So I still have meaning in life. Okay, so one thing that we have available to us that I started mentioning last time is if we have a signal that goes like this and is really, really jumpy or bounces around like this, or we have a signal that spends a lot of time doing nothing and then has one quick peak and then continues to do nothing, this can be very difficult to detect because the amount of time that is on is not very much compared to the amount of time it's off. For a lot of components, having a system like this set up where it only takes one short signal would actually require a lot of power. You're wasting a lot of power because you have to power that chip to do nothing for most of the time. And then when it does happen, it's very short incident. So what we've come up with, and this is something that I really think is important. It's an important concept not just for this class, but for measurements as a whole. If you were to take your Raspberry Pi knowledge and you were to say, I want to figure out whether a button is being pushed or a button is not being pushed, okay? So let's say we're writing a code on whether or not a button is being pushed. And if so, count how many times that button is being pushed. This is going to require some memory because we're going to have to figure out how many times it's being pushed. So we will have to store some value and add to it. But let's say we were to go through this. We do our GPIO.input, to measure whether or not the button is being pushed. Okay, so we got built all of our pre-code. We got GPIO dot read. I don't actually recall the code off the top of my head, but I'm just going to say perhaps it's this. Don't quote me on it. pin 12, okay? And this will either come back true or false, okay? And so if it comes back true, then our count is going to increase by 1, okay? There we go, right? This is going to count the number of times the button is being pushed. Well, not quite. If we did something like this for figuring out how many times the button is being pushed, when I push a button, I got big meaty hands. When I push a button, I really push that button. Like, I take that button and I let it know that, oh boy, you don't cross me in a dark alley, I'll push you. Okay? So when I push a button, I look like this. Okay? Now the sampling of the actual Raspberry Pi is something where it takes a sample every so often. But this sampling, excuse me, is actually going to capture a number of points on and off. So the actual stream of data that's coming in to the Raspberry Pi is going to be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay? If I run this code, where every time it reads a true value in this data stream of button presses being read in through pin number 12, then what I'm going to end up with is it's going to add 1 here, 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 here. That's 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay? I push the button twice, this is going to read 13. Because every time it samples, it's determining whether or not it's true or false. It's saying it's true, therefore the button is being pushed. Add another value. Throw another shrimp on the barbie. Okay? That's not what we want. We only really want this to measure once here. And for that reason, we really only care about this here. Okay? This, as I pointed out last time, is called the leading edge. We want to see when this transition occurs. When this transition occurs, when it starts low, ends high, that tells us the button has been pushed. When it starts high and ends low, so here we have a transition between high and then goes to low, this is the button being let go. This is a trailing edge, okay? So here, this is the leading edge, because it starts at 0, 0, and then the next value is 1. This is a trailing edge, because it starts at 1, ends at 0. Here we see another leading edge because it transitions from 0 to 1. Back here, we would see another trailing edge because it starts at 1, next value is 0. Okay? So if we can only detect the front edges, and we say, instead of just saying if it's on, but detect the front edge, what we end up with is we see in this code, if we were to just go straight forward and say 0, anything where it says 0, 1 is the leading edge, which it is. Okay? We would have 1 here and 1 here. Those are our 2 leading edges. That we only have 2 button pushes. It doesn't matter how long I hold the button down now. It doesn't matter how many samples the Raspberry Pi has for this button being depressed. I only get 2 measurements because there's only 2 of these edges where it switches from off to on. I can double that value by also measuring trailing edges. Maybe I only measure trailing edges. Here I have 2 trailing edges. Some systems will only activate off the trailing edge. That's cool. Okay, so this is, if we wanted to integrate this now into a circuit where I only have, when I have a leading edge change, I want to see a change in my memory state. I don't want that memory state to be dependent on the value actually being on. because now not only can I send signals very, very quickly if I only measure the leading edge, but I can also have a signal where it's 0 for most of the time and then very quickly turns on, turns off, and I still have a leading edge. Leading edge detection is actually fairly cool. It's something where the technology is much faster than actually reading a value. It's kind of weird. So this is why engineers have come up with the edge triggered D flip flop. Okay. With the camera went out. Sometimes I am not good at this. So decided not to. Thank you. Focus that real quick. I just took a picture of the whiteboard. Awesome. That's how my day is going. Okay. So the thing about an edge triggered D flip flop is, once again, I'm going to draw this as a square. It's pretty common for these to be drawn as squares. And then what I'm going to have come into this is, let me see the diagram the book has. Is that there's a D, a C, a Q prime, and a Q. That's also common as a Q naught. And then what you have is, in this signal, again, C stands for clock, so this will only change. There's a clock input that says, okay, if in one section of the clock change we see a rising edge, then go ahead and detect that rising edge. Okay, the truth table for this is C, D, Q. If C is 0, doesn't matter what these are, nothing is going to change. Okay? So that means Q is equal to Q, whatever the value was before. The rest of these, the clock has to be 1. If D is 0, Q stays as whatever Q is. Okay? Oh, that's right. Okay. Nope, I got this wrong. What this will do is the edge triggered flip flop will only, when the clock signal changes. So if we have one of these things going on, it'll only change values here, 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 and here. I apologize. So if you have a leading edge, this would be a leading edge triggered D flip flop. Otherwise, you could have a trailing edge triggered flip flop where it comes off of this one instead. Okay? So leading edge, trailing edge, leading edge, trailing edge. Here this is leading edge triggered, so we're going to put the up arrow and say every time the clock flips, it'll read what the value of D is and actually put that as Q. Okay, so if this is 0, this will be changed to 1. I just said that exactly wrong. Okay, let me start over from the beginning. So this is an edge triggered D flip flop. The idea here is if the clock is off, nothing happens. If the clock is on, So here, if we're riding along in this territory, nothing is happening to the flip-flop. If we're riding along this territory, nothing is happening. There is no changes to the flip-flop. The flip-flop is just hanging out. If a leading edge is detected, which only occurs here, here, and here, then what it does is it takes whatever is coming in as signal D, and it says, make it that. Whatever D is, it saves that as Q. Okay? Now, with your clock signal, you can see that we can actually play around with this a little bit. Because if we put in a regular clock signal, yes, it will store the value of D for one full clock cycle. But we could also put in a different clock signal in. I can make it be something like this. Okay? Where now it takes the value, as soon as this leading edge is determined, it reads whatever value of D it is, changes the Q to be equal to that value, and then stops. And then it waits until this period over here where it then once again detects a leading edge. Here, there's your leading edge, and it reads in the value of whatever D is, and it makes Q be whatever D is. Okay? We can do that. There's some interesting homework assignments in your book that actually do stuff like that. So if you really want to go through the end of your book and play around with those, they're kind of fun. There's also a delay flip-flop, which does, well, that's what this is. D stands for delay. And that it basically just says it stores the value of one signal that was present whenever that value for Q was stored. And then it can spit it out for a long period of time. It's like a storage unit where it's throw it in there and it's kept in static until you update it again. Okay. The last kind of flip-flop that we're going to be talking about is the JK flip-flop. With a JK flip-flop, the fun thing about a JK flip-flop is this is it is a toggle, okay? So a JK flip-flop is both, it has the ability to, if you put in a value, it switches the output. The book doesn't give you a diagram. I'm sure that you can find a diagram online. But with a JK flip-flop, what you have is you have J, you have K, here's your clock. There's actually a special thing on the chip that shows where the clock is. And then you have your Q, and your Q not coming out. Okay. Similar to our clock triggered flip-flops earlier, if the clock is off, we have C, J, K, and Q. If the clock is off, nothing is happening. It doesn't matter what J and K are, it simply stores. So Q is whatever it was before. The value of Q doesn't change. It cannot change when the clock is off. Clock signal is off, nothing happens to Q. Okay, so when the clock signal is on, with a JK flip-flop, this is an edge-triggered JK flip-flop. Again, nothing happens. You can have it be where it's not an edge-triggered JK flip-flop, or not even a clocked flip-flop. But this is the one that the book gives you. I'm going to make this be a positive edge-triggered flip-flop, so it'll say when it detects a positive leading edge, if it's a negative triggered, then it detects when a trailing edge occurs. But here, when both of these come in at 0, you have the memory state again, okay? So, if the clock is off, Q stays the same as whatever it was. If the clock is on, Q stays the same. If you detect a clock edge, but both of these inputs are 0, Q stays whatever it was. So this has been a very, very boring truth table so far. Now we do have where if you have 1 for k, a positive edge is red. So there's a leading edge. On the leading edge, the value of k is 1, the value of j is 0. This acts as a reset. It forces q back to be 0. Okay? So it resets the value. This is like having k be r. The positive edge is red, and the value of j is 1, and the value of k is 0 at that time. This is a set state. It forces q to be 1. Okay? And we do have one last condition where both of them are 1. And what this does is we write it like this because whatever q used to be, we toggle it. Okay, this is a toggle. If it's on, it turns off. If it's off, it turns on. That's it. Okay? So here we do have the ability to reset. We do have the ability to reset means we turn it to 0. Set means we turn it to 1. And we have the ability to toggle. So the JK flip-flop, is very useful. It is oftentimes used as a flip-flop because it has every capability of an SR flip-flop. Here this is even edge triggered like the D flip-flop, but it also has this toggle capability. So yes, I like them JK flip-flops. Okay, that's really all I have for you from this chapter. So I will post your project assignment online, and then I'm still going to have a lecture on Thursday, but the lecture on Thursday is going to be solely devoted to trying to help you finish your project. I'll be talking through wiring diagrams. I'll be showing you Raspberry Pi code. So if you're struggling with your project, pay attention to my next 3 lectures. 2 weeks from now is finals week. Your project will be due. I'm not going to have any lectures, or really I'll be available through email, but I'm not going to be doing anything as far as posting any videos. I'm not giving you any new assignments. So this is going to be a very interesting 2 weeks. 2 weeks from now, we're all free from this hellscape that is Rona education. So, all right. I'll see all of you on Thursday for those of you who want to have help with the project. And I'll be talking a lot about the Raspberry Pi too. If you have your Pi and you want to play along, go for it. We'll see you then.